CNBC-TV18, embarking on a quarter century of excellence.
Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Pan. The headlines we're tracking for you tonight. Gridlock at the COP28 Climate Summit. The draft text calls for reducing emissions but does not seek to phase out fossil fuels. US, UK, EU and Australia refuse to sign the agreement, saying it will be a death certificate for small island nations. Inflation in November accelerates 5.5% but remains below estimates. Food inflation at 8.7% is still a concern. Industrial output picks up pace with nearly 12% growth in October. The Quad summit between India, US, Japan and Australia will not take place in January. President Biden is unlikely to visit India for the Republic Day celebration. An official statement is awaited. Shares of Infosys decline after CFO Nilanjan Roy's surprise resignation. He's the 9th senior executive to quit in the last 18 months. 5 of those executives who quit are now leading large IT companies. Cash-strapped SpiceJet announces plans to raise over 2,200 crore rupees by issuing equity shares and warrants. Promoter Ajay Singh's stake is set to decline from over 56% to 34% after the fundraise. SpiceJet also reports a loss of 431 crore rupees in Q2. A US federal jury rules that Google's Android App Store operated as an illegal monopoly. Video game maker Epic wins a major court battle over commissions charged by Google for access to the App Store. Google says it will challenge the verdict. Impact investor Omidyar Network decides to halt India investments and pull out of the country by the end of 2024. The organization, backed by eBay founder Pierre Omidyar, has invested in 90 startups and social enterprises in the country. These include unicorns like Vedantu, Daily Hunt and Dealshare. Former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan says India should take advantage of the high-value aspects of manufacturing like coding instead of assembling and packaging. Also called for bolstering the services sector for competitive edge. BJP springs another surprise. First-time MLA Bhajan Sharma named as the next Chief Minister of Rajasthan. The party has chosen 3 new faces to lead governments in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan, overlooking former Chief Ministers Vasundhara Raje and Shivraj Singh Chauhan as well as Raman Singh. Israeli forces continue to bomb Gaza. Palestinian authorities claim 20 people were killed, including 7 children in the city of Rafah. The UN General Assembly is due to vote today, demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. Taiwanese EV maker Gogoro makes its formal entry into India with electric scooters and battery swapping stations. Promises to invest $2.5 billion by 2030. Seeks government subsidy for both plug-in EVs and battery swapping. Serum Institute's Adar Poonawalla will buy a house in London for nearly 1,500 crore rupees. This is the most expensive residential real estate deal in London this year. Well, pricey real estate deals coming up in just a bit, but first up, as always, the market action of the day. The markets failed to hold on to the opening gain, so we saw a range-bound session today with the Nifty and the Sensex ending about 0.5% lower. The Nifty was largely dragged lower by HDFC Bank, Reliance and L&T. The broader markets also fell in line with the blue chips. So that's the Nifty down about 90 points. Reliance Industries lost 1.5%. HDFC Bank 1% lower as well. Over to the oil market, where oil prices held steady as all eyes are on the key interest rate policy and inflation data announcements. That's not all. Prices remain mildly higher amidst doubts that production cuts by OPEC next year would offset crude oversupply and weaker fuel demand growth. So, of course, all eyes on the US Fed. But the big story this evening, India's retail inflation in the month of November accelerated to 5.5%, but this is well below the CNBC-TV18 estimate of 6%. Food inflation, though, remains a concern as prices surged by 8.7%. On the good news, India's industrial output has picked up pace in October with a growth of nearly 12%. Lata's here with more on the inflation and IIP data. Lata.
Yes, there is a Goldilocks scenario with the growth number coming higher than expected for October industrial output and inflation number coming lower than expected for the November CPI number. Inflation is more important, CPI, because it is the index which the MPC tracks. And here the news is very good. expectation of 6%, and the actual number coming 45 basis lower at 5.55. But first, let me give you a bit of the bad news. Underneath this is a food inflation, which is a bit scary at 8.7%. It has been propelled by three factors which also were bad in the October data on CPI. The first one is vegetables. Vegetables are up 17.7%. We thought we had quelled the tomato inflation. We now have an onion and tomato inflation taking the year-on-year growth to 17.7, and even month-on-month, vegetables are up 5%. The other nasty contributor is pulses. Pulses are up 20% year-on-year. That's significant considering that, you know, in a country which has a large vegetarian population, it's the sole source of protein, and therefore this is, you know, a cause of bother for the government and for the policymakers. The other nasty element has been cereals and fruit. Fruit is the new addition. Cereals remain at over 10% year-on-year, and fruit, which was up 9% last month, is up now 10.95% year-on-year, almost 11%. So these are the four contributors. None of them are going away in a hurry. Vegetables may decline as we come to December, but no such luck when it comes to pulses. The Rabi acreage is actually lower than last year, and therefore we have to worry that the food inflation is going to be with us for some time. But the headline inflation is unlikely to breach the Reserve Bank's full-year target of 5.4. So as far as the bond markets are concerned, you can breathe a bit easy about the RBI's action. Growth numbers very good at 11.7% October industrial output, and supporting it is actually across the board. Electricity is up 20%, manufacturing is also up significantly. The only thing we need to remember is that the base was very poor. It was minus 4.1 industrial output in October of 22, and therefore this 11.7% is good, but it gives a 2-year CAGR of probably under 5-6%. It's not very significant. However, components like electricity have done very well. The other component that definitely merits being mentioned is that consumer durables and non-durables have done very well. We were, not doing too well in consumer durables and certainly doing badly in consumer non-durables. Both of them are at double digits and very strong double digits for consumer durables. So on the growth front as well, positive.
Good news on the growth front. Many thanks, Lata, for joining us. Meanwhile, inflation in the US remains stubborn. The consumer price index accelerated 0.1% in November compared to October. A CNBC poll had estimated inflation to remain unchanged month on month. The CPI remains over 3% on a year-on-year basis. Rising fuel prices the main culprit. The US Federal Reserve meeting on interest rates begins today. A decision will be announced tomorrow post-midnight. It is the final day of the COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai, and we have a gridlock. The draft agreement has countries at loggerheads as negotiators are likely to burn the midnight oil in hopes of finding a consensus. The summit is also likely to be extended. So what is the issue? The draft agreement mentions the need to reduce emissions. However, it does not outrightly say that fossil fuels should be phased out. That's the phrase to be kept in mind. The US, UK, European Union, Australia and other developed nations have refused to sign the agreement, calling it a death certificate for smaller island nations. Developing nations, along with major oil producers, are opposed to any demand for, once again, keep that in mind, phasing out fossil fuels. Sonal Bhutra joins us now with the latest. Deadlock, Sonal, on the agreement.
Well, it is the last day of the COP28 summit, and there was a draft which was issued yesterday. This is the global stock take, the first one as per the Paris Agreement. And while it did talk about various measures that should be taken to phase out greenhouse gas emissions or reduce them, it did not mention anything on phasing out of fossil fuels. And this drew a lot of criticism from across the globe. And this is something which was expected since it was present in the previous draft that was issued earlier. Now, with no mention of fossil fuel phase out, there's been disapproval from the likes of United States, European Union, a lot of smaller countries as well, which are actually badly impacted because of climate change. In fact, it was OPEC plus members, Russia, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, they have resisted the phase out phrase. These are the countries which are actually big producers of oil as well. Now remember, fossil fuel phase out, as it was mentioned in the previous draft, it was expected to be the final term as well. While this draft does not mention anything on fossil fossil fuels, it does mention tripling of renewable energy, doubling of energy efficiency. It talks about rapidly phasing out unabated coal and also accelerating zero and low emissions technology. But we had highlighted earlier that there were concerns about Dubai hosting COP28 because the presidency is in hands of Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, who is the MD and Group CEO of a fossil fuel producing company, that is Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. So there were concerns around that already, and that's something that we've seen in the climate draft as well. However, there's still we are still awaiting the final agreement that would come out, the final stock take that is. But for now, this has drawn a lot of debate and a lot of controversy.
Yes, controversy and an impasse. So many thanks for joining us. Now, the Chief Financial Officer of Infosys, Nilanjan Roy, has exited the company, and this is the 9th top-level resignation that the company has seen in the last 18 months. Infosys has appointed Jayesh Sangrajka as the new CFO, and he will commence his role from the 1st of April 2024. Now, out of the 9 top employees that have exited Infosys, 5 executives are now actually leading large IT companies. Former Chief Operating Officer Ravi Kumar is now the CEO at Cognizant. Mohit Joshi, who was the president at Infosys, is now the managing director and CEO at Tech Mahindra. So the new HUL, the CEO factory as it was called, Infosys delivering on that with CEOs coming in from the Infosys fold at several IT companies. CNBC-TV18 Newsbreak confirms Sterling Wilson Renewable Energy has launched its qualified institutional placement. The floor price has been set at 365 rupees a share. Sources say the company is likely to raise 1,500 crore rupees and the amount will be used towards debt reduction. And speaking of fundraising, Jammu and Kashmir Bank has also launched a qualified institutional placement to raise 750 crores. The lender set a floor price at 112 rupees a share, and this is a 10% discount from yesterday's closing price. The funds will be used towards boosting the bank's financial position. Shares of the bank rose in early trade on this development. And shares of Mankind Pharma declined after a 6,400 crore rupee block deal where nearly 9% equity in the company changed hands. Sources tell CNBC-TV18 that Chris Capital and Capital Group could be the likely sellers. Cash-strapped SpiceJet has announced plans to raise over 2,200 crore rupees by issuing equity shares and warrants to a series of investors. The airline plans to use these funds towards operational expansion and fleet addition. Now, promoter Ajay Singh's stake is set to decline from over 56% to 34% after this fundraise. Madiha joins us now with more. Madiha, crucial fundraise. What is this capital infusion going to mean for SpiceJet?
Well, absolutely, Shireen. This fundraise is absolutely very crucial for SpiceJet. Given the acute liquidity crunch, the airline has managed to rope in fund houses and private investors to infuse over 2,200 crore rupees. Some of the names include Elara, Ares, Mahapatra, Universal and Nexus Global, among other investors. After this fundraise, promoter Ajay Singh's stake in SpiceJet will be diluted from over 56% to 34%. Now, why this fund infusion is important? SpiceJet reported a net loss of over 400 crores in the second quarter of this fiscal. This is almost half of its loss in the same period last year. The airline's overall debt stands at over 1,600 crores as of FY22. Besides this, there are many pending payments that the airline has to make. SpiceJet says it will use the fresh funds towards operational expansion, fleet enhancement, route network expansion and technological advancement. The airline has been taking steps to turn things around. To name a few, it has launched 13 new routes in the second quarter. Ajay Singh has infused 200 crores of the 500 crore rupees he had promised earlier. The airline converted Carlyle Aviation's dues into equity, so 230 crore rupees went off the books there. It also settled dues with aircraft lessor Castle Lake and repaid the 100 crore rupee loan it had taken from City Union Bank. A quick look at the airline's performance shows SpiceJet is having a passenger load factor of 90% and its market share has improved from 4.2% in July to 5% in October. So this is a snapshot of where the airline stands currently. How these funds will change its course will be something we will watch out for.
All right, Madhya, appreciate you joining us. That is SpiceJet. Staying with aviation, Air India has unveiled its new uniforms for its pilot and cabin crew designed by Bollywood's favourite, Manish Malhotra. The colours match Air India's new aircraft livery that was unveiled earlier this year. The new uniforms will be introduced in a phased manner over the next few months, starting with Air India's first Airbus A350, which will start operating early next year. Now, Serum Institute's Adar Poonawalla will buy a house in London for nearly 1,500 crore rupees. This is the most expensive residential real estate deal in London this year and the second most expensive residence ever sold in London. We learned from sources that the property is a company guest house, which will help provide access to global opportunities. The property will be acquired by Serum Life Sciences, a UK subsidiary of the Serum Institute. Padget Electronics, a subsidiary of Dixon Technologies, has bagged a manufacturing contract from Lenovo. The contract has been awarded under the PLI scheme for manufacturing laptops and notebooks. Dixon is now eyeing a bigger market share with the Lenovo deal. Important news coming in: the Quad summit between India, Australia, US and Japan will not take place in January. Sources say that the US President Joe Biden is also unlikely to visit India for the Republic Day celebrations. An official announcement, though, is yet to be made. Parikshit is standing by with more details. Parikshit, what has led to the Quad summit being pushed?
Well, this was being looked at with great anticipation. We had invited President Biden for the Quad summit and also as the chief guest for the Republic Day. Government sources maintain the peg here was the Quad summit, which was proposed for the 27th of January. We must point out to our viewers that Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, was okay with coming to India on the 27th, a day after their National Day, for the Quad summit here in New Delhi. The Japanese Prime Minister was also fine with 27th as a date. It seems that President Biden has had an issue with scheduling. Now, this is also coming at a time when there has been a bit of friction in Indo-US ties because of the indictment in a US court of an Indian national and also the alleged involvement of an Indian government employee in directing an assassination attempt on a Sikh separatist. Now, this was taken up at the very highest level with the Indian government at the recent 2+2 dialogue, where the US Secretary of State and the US Defense Secretary were also here. Now, the government maintains that this has nothing to do with the indictment in a US court or the allegations made by the Canadian government in the Nijjar case, because there has been a very high level of engagement between India and US very recently. One, of course, you had Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin both coming to India. You've got the US NSA John Feiner, you've had the FBI director, and you may also see the US trade representative coming to India in the next few weeks. So that very high level engagement on ICT, on trade, on defense production, that continues to take place. At the same time, there is a belief that you've got the State of the Union address in US coming up towards the end of January, early February, and all of that, and domestic politics in the US may also have a role to play. But all of this does put a question mark on when the Quad summit will take place, because you've got elections in India and you've got elections in the United States as well. So probably only later in 2024, but no dates just yet.
Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. So no Quad summit in January, as was expected. A major setback to Google and its App Store. A US federal jury has ruled that Google's Android App Store, dubbed by the company as a Play Store, is operated as an illegal monopoly. Video game maker Epic took Google to court over the commission. Google charges companies for access to the Play Store. Google charges anywhere between 15% to 30% as commission. The jury ruled that the Android App Store has been protected by anti-competitive barriers that have damaged smartphone consumers and software developers. Several startups in India, including fintech and gaming companies, have been opposed to Google's Play Store commissions. The CCI of India is also currently probing the matter. Impact investment firm Omidyar Network India has decided to exit the country and transition out of the market by the end of 2024. The company's management told CNBC-TV18 that it's achieved its primary objective of catalyzing impact. The company invested more than $500 million in over 90 companies, including unicorns like Vedantu, Daily Hunt and Dealshare. So Omidyar packing up in India. Taiwanese EV maker Gogoro has made a formal entry into India with electric scooters and battery swapping stations. The company has promised to invest $2.5 billion by 2030. It's also called on the government to provide subsidy for both plug-in EVs and battery swapping.
India is a very important market for Gogoro, right? As we develop the technology, as you mentioned, we came from Taiwan, where we now have about 1.3 million batteries and about 600,000 subscribers actively using the system. We learned a lot, and as we launched a pilot in India also last November, we also learned a lot. We adjusted technology, we fine-tuned our product, and we're ready to go live, and we're very excited about that.
Well, that's Gogoro on its India foray. It's been more than 2 years since the cabinet approved the setting up of a bad bank. State-run banks have barely transferred 12,000 crore rupees worth of bad loans against the stated goal of 2 lakh crore rupees, out of the 12,000 crore rupees, that is. The State Bank of India has transferred more than 4,500 crores, followed by Punjab National Bank, transferring more than 2,100 crore rupees, so hasn't taken off as was expected. India should not have a manufacturing fetish. That's the word in from former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan. Speaking with CNBC-TV18 about his new book, Breaking the Mold, Rajan said that India should take advantage of the high value-add aspects of manufacturing, like coding instead of assembling and packaging. He also called for bolstering the services sector for competitive advantage. Take a look.
When you look at cars today, when you look at the Tesla, there's 40 million lines of code in the Tesla. We are a coding superpower. Why don't we focus on the high value-added part of the Tesla, for example, instead of focusing on the lowest value-added part, which is assembling the product? Let's not have a manufacturing fetish where we think we have to be like China, start with the low end and we will move up. There are lots of impediments in that way, amongst which are that the world has moved on.
That's Raghuram Rajan. Up next on India Business Hour, the Indian traveller is looking beyond borders with renewed vigour. A special report on why people are choosing vacations abroad. Up next. Catch CNBC-TV18's news and updates on Facebook, X, Threads, Instagram and JioCinema. Well, the big national story, the BJP has chosen Bhajan Sharma as the next Chief Minister of Rajasthan. Senior party leaders, including Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, attended a meeting of newly elected representatives in Jaipur today. Sharma was elected from the Sanganer constituency, which is in the Jaipur district. He's a first-time MLA and another surprise choice after Mohan Yadav was chosen as the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh yesterday. Now, with this, the BJP has chosen 3 new faces to lead governments in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Rajasthan, overlooking former Chief Ministers Vasundhara Raje, Shivraj Singh Chauhan and Raman Singh. Well, the last few months have seen carriers like Air India, Indigo and Emirates place bumper orders for aircraft from Boeing and Airbus. While some of these may be replacement orders, a lot of this coincides with new destinations, especially connecting new Indian cities to international destinations. Jude Sandith reports this is a signal that the Indian traveller is looking beyond India's borders with renewed vigour.
A fortnight ago, Singapore Airlines low-cost carrier Scoot resumed its daily flights from Chennai to Singapore, a route it had suspended due to poor demand. This is not the only new route on its roster. Scoot now has 6 Indian destinations locked and is hinting at expanding its India presence, especially in Tier 2 towns.
We're still evaluating different destinations. I've been visiting markets, looking for because when you pioneer second-tier cities, you have to unlock them in the right order. Right. You don't want to go too early to a market that's not ready. So I think, in our minds we have some ideas, nothing that we can share today, but I said we would like to expand.
This comes even as airlines around the world are shoring up their fleets. Indigo and Air India, between them, have unlocked a war chest with $125 billion in it. $52 billion in Emirates' fleet expansion budget is already spoken for. Experts point out that there's a clear distinction between the Emirates order and those by Indian carriers.
India growth is a reality, and that is the reason why Air India, Akas, Indigo, all of them are growing. But if you look at Emirates, the capacity increase that they bring is very less. Its considerable part is replacement.
But this does not mean that new aircraft will not service a longer list of destinations. Indigo has already begun this process with 20 new destinations over the last 6 months, including Almaty, Nairobi, Baku and Tbilisi, many being serviced by new international connections in Hyderabad, Ahmedabad and Goa. A lot of this is driven by a spike in outbound travel. A Ministry of Tourism report estimates outbound travel has grown 37.9% year-on-year for the January-July period, despite an overall hike in the cost of travel. This spike has been nudged along by destinations like Sri Lanka, Thailand and Vietnam, easing visa regulations for Indians.
We've also seen healthy growth in our what we call converts, number of orders, as you put it, right? So that's also growing much faster than the market, and year on year we're growing at least about 30-35% on that number as well.
So with aircraft, routes, destinations and the number of people traveling from India on the rise, experts and players are certain that India is in for a new baseline when it comes to outbound travel. In Chennai, Jude Sanath.
While Prime Minister Modi inaugurated the Global Partnership on AI Summit in Delhi, India will chair the 28-nation grouping that hopes to formulate rules on regulating and fostering growth of artificial intelligence. More than 150 startups will take part in the summit and showcase their products.
भारत में AI कंप्यूट पावर की पर्याप्त क्षमता स्थापित करना है। इससे भारत के स्टार्टअप्स और इनोवेटर्स को और बेहतर सुविधाएं मिलेगी। इस मिशन के तहत एग्रीकल्चर, हेल्थ केयर, एजुकेशन जैसे सेक्टर्स में AI एप्लीकेशंस को प्रमोट किया जाएगा। हम अपने इंडस्ट्रियल ट्रेनिंग इंस्टीट्यूट के माध्यम से AI स्किल्स को टियर 2 और टियर 3 शहरों तक पहुंचा रहे हैं।
Well, that is the Prime Minister at the Global AI Summit currently underway in New Delhi. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned. The news continues right here on CNBC-TV18.
CNBC-TV18, embarking on a quarter century of excellence.